Welcome to the show, viewers and listeners. I'm so lucky today to have Sacha Thompson with me. How are you doing, Sacha?
I'm doing well, Bill. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a pleasure. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Absolutely. So, hello, everyone. My name is Sacha Thompson. I am the founder of the Equity Equation, which I call a boutique consulting firm in the Washington, D.C. area. We focus on leadership development that centers psychological safety in the workplace. So, we look at all aspects of the organization and try to make sure that the values and what people should experience that are espoused on the cafeteria wall align with what they're experiencing every single day.
That's so important. Thank you for doing that work. And
Absolutely.
it's something that I'm interested in my coaching practice. So I know I'm going to learn a lot today. And viewers and listeners, take note. There's always things that you're going to pop up and say, "That's interesting. Let me rewind and hear that again."
Absolutely.
So let's start at the beginning. A very
hmm
good place to start. What pulled you into the world of learning and development, and how's your perspective on L&D changed over time?
Yeah, so I am not a traditional L&D person. I kind of fell into this line of work through my coaching and consulting business. So I was doing leadership development as a part of the equity equation, which I started in 2020. And a big part of that was I was in an environment that was very toxic for me. And so I really started doing more work around psychological safety and understanding what psychological safety was. And the aha moments that I had were this is a two-way street, right? Yes, as an employee, there are certain things that we should know. But at the same time, I was running into many of my leaders and managers that were just ill-equipped to deal with some of the challenges that they were being faced with. And so how do we position our leaders and managers to know and understand some of the nuances of just human behavior? So I really fell into some of that work and found, you know what, some of this is just basic management skills. Many of the people that I was working with were promoted because of what they could do, I say, with a widget, right? You could buy it, break it, sell it, do whatever it is with the widget. They weren't necessarily promoted because of their people skills. And so that's the piece that I really started leaning into is how does psychological safety tie into people management and people leadership? What are the skills that are needed? What are the competencies? So really started diving into emotional intelligence and started building curriculum around that. And so many of my clients, I started kind of in that training space, working with learning and development teams and how to help them realize or at least better understand how emotional intelligence shows up in the workplace, how it ties to psychological safety, and how do we start to build some of those skills that they don't necessarily naturally have.
And building those capabilities is so important. As I mentioned earlier, you're so right that sometimes people just haven't done the work, or they don't recognize the importance of doing that work.
hmm
Um, you know, it's always an interesting struggle.
Yeah, I actually was just with a client this morning on site. And, I had to ask the question. I was watching body language. I'm very tuned into people's body language. And I said, if what you're seeing, the results that we were going over a survey and assessment results. And I was like, if it's not landing well with you, I need you to ask yourself why. Like, what is the root of your discomfort? And it's not because of the results. Is it possibly because what you're seeing doesn't align with your personal experience? And as soon as I said that, you could see, like, oh, maybe that's what it is. And so, how many of us react because what we're seeing or whoever's talking to us, they're saying something that is foreign because it's not been our experience. And then we judge or we try to fix them based on what our experiences are. And so, I see that so often. And really, that's tying into the empathy side of emotional
Mhm.
intelligence, right? How are you putting yourselves in that person's um, shoes, for lack of a better term? what experiences may be shaping how they are seeing or interacting in this space. What privileges or opportunities have I had where this might not have been something that I've had to deal with in the
Mhm.
past or even ever? So it's those questions, that's that internal work and some of those aha moments that I think so many of us miss because we're so focused on kind of what our path has been through this journey.
And we need to have those aha moments in time to be able to do something about them.
Absolutely.
Um, it's no use wondering days, months, years later and going, oh, I could have done that better.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what was fascinating about today as well too was this was a room full of leaders, like senior executives. And so for them to have those aha moments, for them to realize, wait a minute, some of my colleagues in this room are saying that they don't feel psychologically safe.
Hmm.
What am I missing? Right?
Hmm.
What am I over indexing on or not even thinking about, right? When it comes to my day to day interactions with my colleagues. And then what is the shadow that I cast as a leader? Because if my colleagues are feeling this, I wonder what the folks on my team are feeling, right? If my colleagues don't feel comfortable speaking up or pushing back, I know the folks on my team may or may not. And again, in those that do, what opportunities have they had to be more comfortable or trust whatever the situation is so that they feel comfortable being able to speak out without fear or harm. So there's just so much to unpack, but so few of us as leaders actually take the time to do that introspective work.
And it's hard work. It
It's very hard.
requires some self-criticism, some humility,
Yeah.
and some awareness of how others regard us and react to us.
Absolutely. And so it is hearing the hard things, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes you have to tell the emperor that he has no clothes.
Mhm.
And so, who's willing to say and do that? Or are you just wanting, oh, I want the leader just to stay happy. So it's those situations, but then also what are you feeding into as well? What type of environments are you feeding into where you are perpetuating those same issues and challenges without even necessarily knowing or realizing that you're doing that. Um, so, it's top of mind because we were just in this situation this morning, but there were quite a few aha moments that took place. There were also places where leaders didn't realize they were being defensive
Mhm.
um, until it was on the screen. Like, one of the challenges you have is y'all are defensive. So when
Mhm.
the results say that and then you're seeing it in real time, um, there's a disconnect because it's like, wait a minute, you're saying it and I'm responding, but I don't see that as defensive. I see that as just me speaking my voice or whatever it is. So
Mhm.
helping leaders unpack a lot of those reactions, um, and realizing that how they show up does help create or impacts the psychological safety of their colleagues. And so that's the work that we do. It really is that diving deep into how we're showing up, what environments are we creating, what shadows are we casting, um, and having leaders realize that this can all change, right? These are behaviors. And so how do we start to shift some of those behaviors?
Yeah, and you're getting into an interesting area about what the learning function should look like,
Mm.
who it serves, how it's structured, and where does it sit in the broader organization. And I'm curious to know what how does that work with psychological safety?
So it's nuanced. And it's interesting because I've been brought into organizations from various perspectives. Oftentimes it's learning and development, especially if it's very training focused. But I've been brought in by HR, I've been brought in by executive leaders. Hey, we have an issue on our team and we're just trying to figure out what it is. Been brought in by, the CEO of several organizations. And so it's difficult to psychological safety doesn't sit in one place. It's everyone's responsibility.
Mhm.
And it's not just leaders. Everyone on the team is responsible for helping to create this environment of psychological safety. What I try to call it too is, how do we create a culture of care, where I care
Mm.
about my colleagues, they care about me, we care about the work, we care about our customers and our clients. What does that look like? How do we create that environment that allows us to show up in a very care centered way? So we're bringing back that human centered perspective to this, which often falls into HR.
Mhm.
Learning and development, I think, to some degree, is responsible for helping people at least be educated on some of the skills and help build and reinforce some of those skills. But where it sits is in those everyday interactions. And how are we calling each other in or calling each other out on certain behaviors that are taking shape and taking place? One of the questions that came up today was, well, if somebody keeps making mistakes over and over again, we have to hold them accountable. And I said, well, let's back up a bit, right? When did we start seeing these mistakes happen? And was there communication happening then, or did you just document it? Right. And so are we hiding behind processes and procedures because we don't want to bring
Mhm.
that human element of emotion and feeling and, ooh, this is uncomfortable. But behind a process or procedure, I don't have to feel anything. And so we're doing a disservice to our teams, the people on our teams, when we kind of fall into those spaces. And so psychological safety happens in the beginning. What type of relationship do you have? What questions are you asking them? How can I help you be set up for success? So I don't see that that sits necessarily in HR. That's not the HR's responsibility, nor is it learning and development's responsibility. It is a shared responsibility across the organization, where I think HR can have, absolutely a role in some of those policies and procedures and helping people show up the way that they need to as managers and leaders. I think learning and development can help with some of those core skills and competencies. But it really is up to the day to day frontline managers, people leaders, and how does this look in our everyday interactions? And how do we reinforce the behaviors that we want to be a part of what we're calling this culture or community of care?
Y- And that's a great turn of phrase, the community of care, because in many organizations, we're told to leave our feelings in the car or the
Hmm.
train or the bus or on the sidewalk as we come in. And I've always been a believer in the fact that we bring our whole selves to work. If we're stressed outside the door, we're going to be stressed inside too.
Absolutely.
Work is not a vacation from life after all. It,
Right. Far from it.
yeah, I had a supervisor once who said at an all hands meeting that if you're not happy with the organization, then leave.
Mm-hmm.
Oof. That was a really awkward moment, and nobody dared move.
Of course.
Yeah,
Of
it
course.
yeah, and the other thing he brought up was that we spend more time in our office if we're lucky enough to be full time employed than we do at home, conscious,
Mm-hmm.
because when we're home on the weekday, the vast majority of the time that we spend hopefully is asleep. And well, sleep is good. Sleep is how the brain organizes itself. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it always struck me that observation was kind of sad, and it negated that community of care. It was
Absolutely.
the community of let's pull together and grit our teeth and get through it.
And it's not even that. It's you're a cog in a wheel, or a wheel in a
Mhm.
cog, whatever it is, right? You're a wheel in the machine, a cog in the machine. Um, and what it also sends, the message, the signal that it sends is like, you're replaceable.
Yes.
If you're not happy, leave, because somebody else will be willing to do this work. Right. And so we lose that human element of leadership. Um, and it's sad to so I'm almost starting to see a return back to that way of work. I
Hmm.
was reading the other day. I can't remember what organization it was, but they rolled back their maternity leave from 16 weeks to 8 weeks. And when you look at it, it's easy to say, "Oh, okay, well they're trying to cut cost." They've made more money in the last year than they've ever made before. So it's
Hmm.
not about cutting cost. It's the human aspect of this, right? How do we get our employees back into this? They have no control. Like they need us more than we need them. And so it is a sad state of affairs. And you add on top of this AI and people feeling threatened by their jobs being taken away. And so I've really been pushing this, you know, AI can do a lot of great things. I use AI all the time, but it is not human centered. It does not have, it cannot read the room, it cannot read body language. And so those are the skills that I think leaders really need to lean into. But it also requires what you said earlier around a level of vulnerability, a level of introspection, a level of us understanding how we interact with each other, that cannot be ignored. And so when I talk about creating a culture of care and a community of care, right, there is a level of humanness that you cannot avoid in that process. And so part of the challenge in getting organizations or leaders kind of in that mindset, in that space, is also them shedding that armor of, leave your emotions at the door. This, that doesn't serve you. Emotions can absolutely serve you in some of the greatest ways, and so it's how do you lean into that and not be fearful of those emotions. And so that's the piece that I think we're not seeing as much, but we're really leaning into, as this is going to be the future of work. It's going to be those organizations that know how to balance the technology and the human centered leadership.
And that's a really good point. There's so much fear, uncertainty, and doubt about artificial intelligence, and I always counsel people who come to me with these questions because I've been using AI myself for years.
Hmm.
Um, I always counsel them that the best way to approach AI is as a sidekick, and
Yeah,
it's not necessary to be a full expert, but it is helpful to know the capabilities, which is really challenging because the different vendors are always adding features.
right.
You know.
And there's so many options out
Mhm.
there. Um, And, I was talking to another client yesterday around the challenge is going to be, I'll back up a second. What she's seeing is early career folks are coming in with very strong AI skills and they know
Mhm.
how to, use which AI for this, that, and the other. They have really parsed that out. Where they struggle is with the human interaction,
Mhm.
right? Then you have mid-level folks that are phenomenal with the human interaction for the most part, and are terrified of AI. And so it's like, how do we balance it all? And I think that there are specific industries that can sit at that sweet intersection of the two and really position AI as, like you said, a partner in this, like a sidekick versus a replacement. And I think that's a big part of the fear and what is being communicated. Um, was it Jack Dorsey not too long ago? And I was in tech for several years. So the tech stuff is always coming top of mind, but made a statement that wants to get rid of all of middle managers and have his 6,000 employees that are left report directly to him because else is going to be AI. And I was just like, that is not a healthy work environment at
No.
all. Um, because it's so reliant on technology. But at the same time, one person managing 6,000 people, how effective and efficient will that be? And professional development goes out the door, right? When you're operating in ways where it's all about just productivity, you're creating robots. You're creating, again, the cog in the machine, and it's less about the human need, the human interaction, all of those. So I'm really sitting back and just watching and seeing how people, excuse me, how people are reacting to AI and how they're using it, what challenges they're bringing up. And more, I'm hearing, oh, I have AI teammates, but I want to pick up the phone and talk to somebody. Like I
Hmm.
want that human interaction. And so I'm just really waiting to see when the bubble bursts,
Hmm.
how leaders step up and show, okay, this is the value that we bring because we do have that human centered approach, and that we do know and understand how to lean into empathy and all of those things that we're talking about. Because I really believe that that is going to be what is going to be most important, regardless of industry, at the end of this.
And the pendulum is going to swing back.
Absolutely.
I have studied organizations for decades, and we go through these cycles of command and control organizations versus organizations that can embrace care, can embrace quality of life,
Mm.
and they become places where healthy conversations happen, as opposed to somebody saying, "Do what you're told."
Yeah. And the pandemic shifted a lot of that for people, right? Once
Mhm.
everything was shut down, and you had to prioritize, like there was no leave work at the door because work was in your home, right? And so I think a lot of people kind of stayed into that mindset of there is no work life balance, it's just life, and work is a part of it. And at the same time, it's how do I prioritize what's important to me. I want to be in an organization that values me, right, that values my contributions. I want to be someplace where I'm mission aligned with the values of the organization. I started seeing more of that after the pandemic. Um, and I still see that, I still hear that all the time. I was speaking to a university class last night, and that was one of the things that they were saying, like, we want to do mission driven work. That's great, but mission driven isn't going to pay your bills. So how do we balance how do we balance making this business profitable for you while you are still being very mission driven? So I definitely feel this pendulum is swinging back to a place of what I hope is a more human centered perspective. But technology is going to be a key part of that, and it's not how do we leverage the technology so that it's not using us, and that's the piece that some folks are really struggling with.
And the struggle is real.
Very real.
You know, I've been around long enough that I remember when personal computers started coming into organizations, and we had similar fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And some positions were lost, of course, but there were opportunities to upskill and learn how to use the technology to become more productive and do more satisfying types of work. Um, and I have to believe that AI will do this as well for us. But we've got to be realistic isn't the right word. We've got to be aware
Yeah.
of what not only what the potential is, but what the limitations are with AI. AI doesn't feel, it doesn't understand context. AI is a word prediction engine the way it's currently structured,
Yeah.
and it you know it's not anywhere near like talking to an actual human being and having a relationship with them.
No. And it's based, again, it's based on data, right? Data sets.
Mhm.
And so when I hear that there are organizations that are using AI as part of their performance planning, how is that working for you? Because
Mhm.
the manager still has to have that interaction with that person, and know there's that nuance that AI doesn't necessarily pick up on. So I'm very curious to see, what happens. I have not quite come across an organization that's gone through a cycle of it yet. but I'd be very curious to see if what the difference is between an AI performance review versus a manager led performance review. Have you seen or any heard anything about that?
Yes.
Oh,
And I think there is a role for AI in performance reviews, but it's, early in the process of
yeah.
drafting the PR. It's it's certainly a jump start on some of the rote work that happens with performance reviews, and AI is wonderful in seeing patterns, especially when you link production data into it or sales data if it's a sales driven organization, because AI can catch things that people don't even look at.
Hmm.
On the other hand, do I want an AI driven performance review process that delivers output that's ready for a manager to use? Now, that's not the kind of organization I want to be involved in.
Yeah. So I think that's the piece for me. It's how are we totally losing the human element of our AI usage?
Hmm.
Are we finding that balance? Because it definitely has to be balanced out. Um, and unfortunately, there's several organizations that would rather deal with AI than deal with people.
Hmm.
So,
And,
and we'll see how that works.
AI is a crutch. AI is a way to avoid those hard conversations that we've been talking about in this
Mhm.
episode. Um,
Absolutely.
and it's no wonder that younger employees come in to an organization, and for a variety of reasons they need to work on their face-to-face interaction. AI can't solve that.
Not at all. Not at all. Um, at the same time, there was an article not too long ago where it said, there's some early career folks that are coming in and they would rather ask AI questions about policy and procedure than go to their manager.
Hmm.
Right. And I was just like, but AI doesn't necessarily know the organization's policy and procedures.
Right.
Right. It's going to give you a general thing unless you're feeding it, here's our policy handbook, right? And based on this, what's the answer? But that also tells me that there's a lack of psychological safety there as well too. Because if I would rather talk to a machine than talk to the person that's managing me every single day, there's something missing in that interaction. And that's the piece that I would want to unpack, right? Why is there more comfort in the technology than talking to the person? There's so much. And I think that we can easily fall into a trap where just figure it out, right? Find out on your own. And if we're pushing people to do this research and push them to lean into AI to get their answers, we're going to become very disconnected from the organization in so
Hmm.
many ways. And I think we just need to be very careful that that human element is never lost in that process. And so getting folks early on in those conversations, I think is such a critical piece because if they don't have that face to face interaction from day one or early on, it's just going to snowball if they even move further within the organization.
Hmm. Hmm. And with each new organization in the workplace, each new generation in the workplace, the previous generations, the older generations, I heard this about my generation. We're job hoppers. We're not loyal. We're not invested in the organization, and I think it's understandable the way organizations have come to treat executives, managers, and employees.
Mhm.
We talked about the cog in the machine earlier, um, and now the machine includes AI, and it there's that pressure to become even more efficient and doing things right instead of doing the right thing and being more effective.
Yep. Yeah. It's fascinating to watch.
It is, and organizations are this grand experiment after all. They have to change, they have to adapt to society, to the markets, to everything in the external environment.
Mm-hmm.
So we're living in interesting times for sure.
Absolutely.
Let's say you could blow up, redesign the corporate learning function from scratch.
Mm.
What would you do differently?
That is such a fascinating question. Um, you know what? I think one of the first things that I would do is understand as a company culture, what are the basic skills that you need to have to survive here. And I say that in, I've worked with organizations where there's very high expectations of analytics. I'll just use analytics as an example. But what that means for me might be very different than what that means for you, right? So are we level setting? Are we setting people up for success with just some of the foundational pieces? And so how do we start this process of learning and developing our people in a way that sets them up for success, not just for the position that they're being brought into, but success at the organization? Like what are the cultural nuances and norms of the organization that people expect you to know and understand, but it's not written in the handbook, right? Those types of things. And so I would kind of flip it a little bit where it's, and we just finished talking about technology, but it's almost like this choose your own adventure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like this opportunity where people can kind of go and learn what they want to learn in a way that ultimately takes them down this path to success, to know more about the organization, but then also teaches them more about the industry, if that makes sense as well. And I'm thinking back to, I had a client that was in the music industry, and some of the feedback that some of the early career folks said was like, I can do my job. Learning and development is kind of teaching me to do my job. And it's also teaching me some like general skills around leadership. But I want to know about the industry. And there's nothing here that's helping me better understand the industry so that I can show up at work better.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's almost this expansion of, we want you to be successful, not just here, but anywhere. And that's knowing your competition, all of those other pieces. So it's not that I would necessarily blow it up. It's how do we expand what we do so that we can really set up people to be successful here, but across the industry. And in doing so, the mindset is this company is investing in me. And so therefore willing to stay a little bit longer because I'm seeing the value, like I'm getting value and they're seeing the return on that investment. And I don't think I've seen enough organizations looking at it from that perspective. Like, how can we feed them from this industry perspective so that they can better help us get to the next level?
Mm.
So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's just kind of how I've been seeing things in a much more industry focused perspective.
And it lines up very nicely with the community of care that we've been talking about today.
Absolutely.
Any closing thoughts for our audience?
Oh, there's just so much. I mean, I think this work is constantly evolving. One of the things that I love to do is, see what's happening in the world around us and how does that lean into creating a culture of care, psychological safety, and making it real for folks. So, if anybody wants to follow me and the work that I do, could join my newsletter off of my website. So it's theequityequationllc.com, or follow me on LinkedIn at /Sacha Thompson. And I share these nuggets all the time, but I also want people to think about how I show up as a leader, how I can better show up as a leader when I center psychological safety and when I center care as a big part of who I am in this human-centered work. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I would leave people with, is like, how can we show up in a more human-centered way? And if they're stumped, definitely let me know, reach out, because those are the nuggets that I love to share.
That's great. And I encourage our listeners and viewers to go get that newsletter. Go check out the website.
Absolutely.
Follow or connect with Sacha on LinkedIn. You'll learn a lot, and you'll contribute to building better organizations as well.
Absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely. And this work is never done.
that's right. That's one of the thrilling things about it. Our work continues no matter what.
Yeah,
So thanks for being with us today, Sacha. It's been a pleasure.
absolutely. Thank you for having me, Bill. This has been fun. This has been a really great conversation.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. And for our audience out there, we'll see you next time for another step on the perfect route.